Okay, bio 2 liters. So, at this point, again, the idea is, as I've said time and time again, is to make sure that you're getting as much from your students as possible. So as you go through, as you go through and read your answer sheet, keep that in mind. Try to come up try to come up with questions that would essentially spark discussions. So in the first question, for example, basically you have to draw and identify the cross sections of the plant leaf and draw and identify the parts of the chloroplast. So for both, you have to identify where photosynthesis occurs and why in that particular spot. Okay, you don't want to tell them the answer. You want to be able to get it from them. You want to elicit it from them. So, you have them come up to the board, you have them draw the figures and label them, and you can have as many people participate in this as possible, of course. Ask them why. So the idea here is why photosynthesis occurs basically in the top mesophyll layer, which is the middle layer of your leaf. Well, if it's the top layer, that's kind of close to the sun, and that's the idea. You want the maximum amount of light exposure for each one of your plant cells, so that you can maximize the amount of energy that you're actually producing, energy and nutrients for plants as well. So by having the majority of chloroplasts in the top level of your mesophyll, the palisade layer, then you maximize the amount of energy that you're able to produce as a result. As far as the chloroplast, you need to have these photosystems in the membrane of your thylakoid, so that you're able to produce this relative concentration gradient, proton gradient, so you're able to power ATP synthase. Okay, to make the ATP molecules that you need to be able to power the cell. Okay. Now, let's see. So as you go through each one of these questions, keep things like that in mind. Make sure that as much as you can use the whiteboard. Have students go up there as much as you can. Ask as many questions as you can. Okay. For the inquiry questions that you will have, such as the one in number 2, it's all about the absorption of light. So remember that absorption versus reflection. 100% absorption means 0% reflection. And the opposite is true as well. 0% absorption means 100% reflection. And you're able to see what you reflect, okay, whatever colors are reflected. So if green is reflected, then you will see the color green. If yellow is reflected, then you will see the color yellow. Okay, and you'll see that in the basic graphs that are shown in number 2. Okay, so you should be able to come up with the basic answer just by looking at and interpreting the graph properly. Okay. Now, as far as number 3 goes, sometimes the phrase dark reactions is used to refer to carbon fixation. Why is this phrase somewhat inappropriate? Well, you don't necessarily have to be in the dark to undergo these reactions. Okay. And it's in essence, that's the basic answer that they should be able to tell you. But there's a little bit more detail that I'll have in the answer sheet. Okay, so make sure you look at all the basic points behind that particular question. So describe the structure and function of a photosystem is the next question, and you would want them to be able to identify what a photosystem is, the different components of the photosystem. Primarily, you have the pigments, which are located inside, and you can relate the inquiry question to this question very easily. Okay, let's see. Oh, and with the pigments, you should be able to ask them, what colors am I able to see with the carotenoids? What colors am I able to see with the chlorophylls? something to that extent. Okay, and that, you know, you can tell the difference between fall and spring color leaves because of the representation of the carotenoids versus the chlorophyll, which are able to ask when you're talking about the basic absorption versus reflection concept with light. Okay. Um, so again, you want them to draw things on the board. So you can draw the actual thylakoid membrane and have them put in the photosystems, and you can use that basic diagram to explain the number 5, which is the Miss Frizzle question. So you already have that basic diagram drawn on the board, but you really go into it in the next question, the Miss Frizzle question, which is basically draw the process of photosynthesis, both the dark and the light reactions. Okay. And one of the most important concepts that they need to make sure that they get out of this is the fact that you have the recycling of all these products. You have the recycling of NADP as NADPH back into NADP. You have the recycling of ADP back into ATP with between the dark and the light reactions. Okay, and you see that very clearly in the figures provided in the answer sheets, okay, which come from chapter 8 in the textbook, okay, in the Raven Biology book. Now, also a key point to make is the difference is not the difference is the relationship that is made between respiration and photosynthesis. How one cannot survive without the other. The reactants is from one is the products in the other, okay, and vice versa. So it's very important to make that point to your students. Without one, you can't have the other. Okay. Now I'll stop here, and in the next video I will start with number 6.